What's up, guys? I'm Dr. Josh with the Premier Life of Carmel, and welcome to the Premier Life podcast. Guys, if you don't know, we're based out of Indianapolis. I know we've been having some metrics on this. Really cool for people joining the podcast on Spotify. We're seeing people join us from like all over the place, even some people from Russia. So some of you may not know where we're located. So we're here in the Indianapolis area, and the Indy 500 is coming up. And I've never been a huge racing fan, but it's a big deal here. So I've been doing some extra research there. And did you know that some of those cars can reach up to speeds of like 200 to 230 miles an hour? So when we look at those, how fast that's going, like you got to make split decisions where everything has to be functioning perfectly. And because things are that fast, you can't just rise up to the occasion. You actually fall where your systems are not working. And now let's think about that. Like everything there falls based on how good your system is. So why would we expect our bodies, specifically our kids, to function in a high speed, high stimulus world without checking their system, specifically the system that controls everything? Because whether we like it or not, or want to accept it or not, like our kids are growing up in a 200 mile an hour world, which is the title of this podcast. How do you raise kids raising in a 200 mile an hour world? And for those of you that hear this and you're like, well, I don't have kids, or my kids are grown, or what have you, you still exist in this world. So this still applies to you and what you're going through every day. If you are a parent listening to this, know that like none of this is your fault. Like guys, we are seeing health issues out the wazoo with kids. And what you need to realize is we are in a place environmentally that no generation has ever been in. And that still applies to you adults as well. Like those of you that are like, okay, well, I don't have kids or I don't have blank. You're still in this world. So think about this, guys. We have more stimulation. We have more noise. We have more pressure. There's more going on. There's more input literally all the time. We are one of the most stimulated generations that there has ever been, and it doesn't turn off. Dude, I remember when I was a kid growing up, like we didn't have all the technology that we had. I could like one of the rules that we had growing up was like you have to spend time outside. You have to go out there and like you have to play, you have to do whatever. You have to be bored to some degree, and like we don't see that happening anymore, guys. There's constant stuff going on. So whether you're seeing it or not, and I feel like most of us feel that something has changed and is continuing to change. So let's talk about what that's actually doing, especially for our kids. So according to the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, over 40% of teens report persistent sadness or hopelessness, which is crazy. And 1 in 3 adolescents struggle with anxiety, according to the National Institute of Mental Health. So what that means is this isn't a rarity anymore, that this is actually showing up in everyday families and maybe showing up in yours. Now let's slow down for a second, okay? Because this is where most parents and people realize that this isn't just another kid. This might be my kid. This might be your kid. Or again, for the adults in the room, this may be me, or this may be my family, or this may be a loved one that I have. If your child melts down over something small and you're thinking, why was that such a big deal? If bedtime feels like a battle every night and you're like exhausted before it even starts. I know we've had those times. If your child goes from completely fine to overwhelmed in a second, or the opposite, maybe they recluse, they pull back, they withdraw, they kind of check out, or they struggle to focus, or they get frustrated easily, or just like aren't acting themselves. We have to realize this isn't a phase, guys. These are not phases. I hear this so many times. Well, it's just a phase. He'll grow through it. The reality is you don't grow through that stuff, guys. These are patterns. These are patterns that our body develops. And when we see these things at a young age, they develop into other things. When you hear the phrase like they'll grow out of it, that doesn't really apply to anything. Really, I wanted to say that doesn't apply anymore, but it didn't apply then either. The body gets stuck in patterns and it can't find its way out. So those dysfunctions turn into different dysfunctions. So again, when I think of, again, from kid to adult, we probably all know, even the adult, that snaps off at something that you're like, hey, like, why was that a big deal? And the reality is those patterns point to the body being overwhelmed and not able to regulate. So here's what most parents haven't been shown is children have one system that controls everything. Adults have one system. You have one system that controls everything. So whether it's sleep, it controls sleep, focus, behavior, immune system, emotional regulation. That system is your nervous system. And it is more overwhelmed now than it ever has been. And everything else starts to show from this. So when kids are constantly exposed to stimulus, the brain shifts into stress mode. So there's a part of your brain called the amygdala, and we can get into the nitty-gritty details, but it's basically your alarm system. It's one of the major functions. So it's telling you, am I safe or is there danger? That's kind of what its job is to do. But what it doesn't know the difference between is it does not know the difference between a real threat, a loud environment, constant screens, emotional stress. It just reads intensity. And research from the Harvard University shows that chronic stress can make your system more reactive over time. So now you see kids or adults who are quicker to get overwhelmed, to react emotionally, to feel anxious. But here's where things click. Think about it. It's like this. The amygdala is like your gas pedal. The prefrontal cortex, which we've talked about in previous podcasts, but it helps a ton with adaptation. It's a major player in the way your brain focuses. But think of that as it acts as a brake pedal. So in a healthy, regulated person, just like a healthy car, you have a healthy gas pedal response and a healthy brake pedal response. So you want that to work when it needs to. So when there's a threat, you want your amygdala to be able to recognize it and go, hey, that's bad. We need to stop. We need to do something about that. But you also need your brain to be able to recognize when things need to slow down. And so this is why when that system is off, this is why when people go, yeah, we try to correct their behavior, but it's not working. It's not because it's a behavioral issue. It's because the system that regulates their behavior is not working. It's overreacting. That's why punishment doesn't fix it. That's why, yelling or getting onto them doesn't make change, because you're trying to correct a behavior that isn't the problem. The problem is that their system is entirely overstimulated. And to speak to the world that we're in, for instance, we just saw somebody today, a young lady who came in with pandas. So for those of you that don't know what that is, it's an autoimmune issue. Like, you're welcome to do your research on it. But recently had a really big trigger a few years ago. And they did all these different lifestyle things that created really great changes. Right? So they did all these detoxes. They looked into all of these different labs and they found all these different exposures that she had. And they pulled these toxins out. They made all these healthy changes. They did all the things. And when I say, like, she had a severe pandas to where, like, she wasn't able to be independent, lost her ability to speak, started having like neurodevelopmental issues, so therefore she went from independent to completely dependent. And in these times of creating these healthy lifestyle changes, all those things started to come back. And they started seeing, like, hey, she's becoming independent again. Like, she's able to speak a little bit better. And then she gets triggered again. But this time, all those things that they did before aren't working. So their question is, well, why isn't this happening? Why aren't all the things that we did before working? And the reality is, it's because there's one piece that unfortunately they missed. And it's not their fault. It's because us as society don't think about health this way, which we need to start changing that. And the only way we change that is when we start sharing this and start actually talking about it. So her family comes in, we get her scans, we see where the problem is. We see her system is exhausted. And that's why this previous trigger, things didn't change, because her adaptive reserves were way lower than they probably were 2 years ago. So therefore, she couldn't adapt as easily now as she used to 2 years ago. And in the midst of explaining this and in the midst of taking care of this girl, we literally see those things start changing immediately. We start seeing the physicality of these neuro autoimmune issues starting to change in the moment. Mom sees it, her eyes get big, and I'm like, "Did you see that?" She's like, "Yeah," and it gave her an immense amount of hope. But you didn't see things like that happening as regularly as you're seeing it now. We are seeing a ton of things going on because now there is, again, more stimulation, screens in the morning, screens at school, screens at home, fast-paced entertainment, like constant noise. These things train the brain to move quickly so that way when we slow down, it irritates the brain because the brain gets it's such an adaptive thing that it gets irritated because it gets so stuck in a pattern of go, go, go. And then that affects sleep, and we all know sleep is crucial in order for the body to be able to reset. And so we have to shift the way we think because it's not just behavioral, it's not just focus, it's not just a sleep problem. This is a body, an overwhelmed system under stress. And so instead of asking what's wrong with me, instead of asking what's wrong with my kid, why don't we start asking how do we help their system function well? Because guys, our body has everything it needs. Our body has an amazing capacity to heal. If we can see somebody change at the table just by regulating their nervous system, think of what your body can do when it's regularly being checked and regulated properly in a healthy way. Guys, this is why our kids are so sick. This is why we see so many metabolic issues. This is why we see these crazy autoimmune issues. This is why we see like crazy numbers in hopelessness and anxiety and mental health issues because our systems are overwhelmed and we're not doing anything to check it. So if you're listening to this and you're seeing these signs, I don't want you to ignore it. I don't want you to wait until like your kids grow up, or I don't want you to wait to like grow out of it. I want you to start taking action now because you would never put your kid or probably yourself in a car that goes 230 miles an hour without making sure that thing works as best as it possibly can. Why would we put ourselves or our kids in a world that runs at 200 miles an hour without checking the system that controls everything? Guys, that's my time. I'm Dr. Josh. And as always, let's grow together.